Well, hello everyone. It's so good to see you all. Thanks for taking the time today, and greetings to everyone who's joining us not live from the recording that we have. It's really exciting to be together today and to have our friends from the Alliance for Camp Health with us. This has been a really exciting partnership for us at Sacred Playgrounds, and one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this and this partnership is because we've seen such an uptick in youth mental health challenges. We've seen this in the young people that we're working with. We've seen it in the statistics from places like the CDC and from all these other places that we're gathering information about young people. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that. And so, how are we addressing these things specifically in the camp environment? We know that camp is designed as a safe space. It's designed as a place where young people can actually feel like they can be themselves, where they can feel free from anxiety and these other pressures, and they can start to discover who am I really, and a safe space to do that. And and so, how can we make sure that our camps stay spaces like that in this changing environment as more of our young people are coming in with different challenges? Um, the work that our friends at the Alliance for Camp Health have been doing has been second to none in this field, and so we're really excited to welcome them in. Uh, John and I, John Hamilton, who I'll introduce in a second, and I met a few years ago at an American Camp Association event, and that's how I got connected with the Alliance for Camp Health. They had already started work on the Campwell initiative, which we're going to be hearing about. There was an excitement around Campwell and around bringing this resource to camp leaders, and specifically with when we got on board to bring it to folks at faith-based camps as well. Are there ways that we can especially, work with specifically faith-based camps? Because Campwell is a program that's for all different types of camps, and so not just faith-based camps. But we're excited to talk a little bit about how it applies to all camps, but also specifically to faith-based camps. So really excited to do this. I've been able to meet with the Campwell team several times, and the rest of the good folks at the Alliance for Camp Health. And so it's really exciting to have them here and to hear about some of the great work that we're doing together. And so this has really been a cool partnership. I'm going to let John introduce himself and the Alliance for Camp Health and tell us a little bit about the amazing work that they do.
Jake, thanks. Jared, thank you. It's great to be in a spot with you all this morning. I reside in southern New Hampshire, about 45 minutes north of Boston and 45 minutes to the Atlantic Ocean. I'm presently in a space where this morning I got to be out on a trail and experience one of those seasonal shifting moments as I was running over roots and leaves that were falling onto the trail, and watched them as they kind of floated down off of trees as they were letting go off of the branches. And so I come into this work as the Alliance for Camp Health's Chief Strategy and Engagement Officer. I'm proud to be a part of an organization that's trying to find ways to move forward where we can elevate care for healthier communities. We're elevating care to look at the ways in which we can change the standard of care that historically we've offered in summer with a desire to improve the health outcomes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But I think that uh, as much as I wear that hat coming into this work and being someone who's been trying to figure out how to breathe life into uh, very much so the essence of this project that has become Campwell over the last few years, the fastest now growing training program of its kind for our industry. I also am a dad. I'm have four daughters, have a blended family, have two other boys that are connected to the work. So spend a lot of time with young people just day in and day out. But also I'm in a spot where I come into this as a former director of a Christian camp near Lake Tahoe in Northern California, and also stepped into a role overseeing a national program that looked really different in terms of how we were supporting some of the statistics that we're going to be talking about that were behavioral related, performance related, but really rooted in well-being and well-being work. being something that, as Jake and I are going to dive into a little bit more, really started at the turn of the century and has been pushing forth in the health industry with the National Institute of Health, the Department of Health and Human Service over the last 25 years, and is somehow just now coming onto the scene for the summer camp industry, which is near and dear to me. I Jake and I have shared stories about camp over the years and what that looks like. But I have seen the ways in which, whether it was being at a day camp through an inner city program when I was a kid, or at a sports camp, or family camp, I've seen the ways in which the work has been so beneficial. But as a father in this space too, recognize that there's ways that camps can continue to improve the ways in which we articulate how special they are and the transformation that takes place there. So yeah, Jake, that's a little bit about where I'm at, where I'm coming from. I'm proud to be here with a couple of my teammates, care team members from the Alliance for Camp Health, Mary Murug and Nikki Alvarado Hobbs, and I'm sure they'll be able to offer some insight as well as we proceed.
Yeah, Nikki, Mary, feel free to say hi, at least in the chat there. And folks, you can direct questions to them. They've got good ACH lens as well. Jake.
So we titled this thing "The Kids Are Not All Right," and we didn't want it just to be clickbait, but it's something that we're all feeling right now. Those of us who work with young people, whether we have our own young people or we're working directly with them in the educational sector or in camping ministry, and so just diving into that a little bit, there's lots of places that you can go for these statistics. I'm going to direct you to a couple of places. One is the CDC, and so you can you can go to these websites and find some of these statistics that talk about teen and youth mental health. So from the CDC website, among U.S. adolescents ages 12 to 17 in the last few years, 20% reported symptoms of anxiety in the past 2 weeks, 18% symptoms of depression in the past 2 weeks, 40% persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in the past year, 20% seriously considering attempting suicide, 9% attempting suicide in the past year. These are sobering statistics that we see. We know that this has been a challenge. We know that the suicide rate among young people, as it had been going up in the 80s and 90s, and then it started to go down again. And then it leveled off and it started to go up again. And this is a very concerning thing for all of us who work with young people. Another great place to look for some of these statistics and to follow these things, because I know some of you like to follow them and have updated statistics, is the Harry Institute. And so this is the Higher Education Research Institute. It's out of UCLA, and they've got some great data on incoming college freshmen. So they have an ongoing survey of incoming college freshmen. They do it every year, and so we have data now from just last fall, 2024, the incoming freshman class. And so this report just came out this year in 2025, and we can really get a sense of these shifting patterns and how the mental health of high school graduates is on a decline again. And specifically, what they highlighted in this report is the disparity between men and women, and between people and among people who are gender nonconforming or non-binary. And so, just looking at some of the simple statistics here about frequently feeling anxious, 21% of men, 46% of women, and 73% of non-binary or gender non-conforming people who are incoming college freshmen. And so we can really see both the high percentages, but also the disparities among the gender groups. And so these are some of the areas you can go to get some of these statistics. We've kind of seen them, we've heard them. Some of us have read the Vivek Murthy book on loneliness and the loneliness epidemic among young people. That's a great place to go. Also, I will commend to you Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, which really talks about the increase in anxiety and the challenges that these young people are facing. We know from all of these works, especially when we look at Murthy's work and Jonathan Haidt's work, that a big part of this problem is the isolation and the lack of face-to-face communication and interaction that young people are having. So much of our interaction is mediated through screens now. And so how can we help them develop healthy friendships, social skills, and all of these things that we know camp does so well? I keep saying this over and over again. In a post-COVID world, in this world where we're constantly mediated by screen technology, we need camp more than ever. And so that is why we're really leaning into this work and this partnership with ACH and trying to focus on this work with Campwell. I'm going to turn it back over to John and let's hear about the importance of well-being and how this is framed with our friends at the Alliance for Camp Health.
Yeah, Jake, thanks for the statistics that you've put in there and the links to those. I think what's challenging, if I'm sitting in a spot like going back to when I was an executive director sitting at a camp going, okay, so great, now what do I do? Like this feels burdensome. This feels heavy. Every single time I'm in and around a conversation, it feels like it's coming back to this. Uh, I think I'd be in that spot going like, how do I look to proceed in this? And is the problem over there versus is it over here? I think part of why ACH, the way in which we strategize around elevating care for healthier communities, we want that to be a higher standard of care. We want the healthier community to be not just in our camp setting, but in, when kids get back into their schools, when they get back home, when they are in their family unit, whatever that may look like. And I believe that the essence of what we are after as camp leaders at this point in time is to recognize where we sit in the midst of the work, right? And if we just use language, there's two pieces that you just brought up. We're not just talking about mental health. Mental health is something that we look at within the work as a part of our Mesh Plus framework that we're going to talk about soon here. The distinction is mental health from a values standpoint is a misnomer in terms of language. If you look at the World Health Organization's definition of mental health, it actually points to well-being. Well-being is a larger umbrella more holistically. Mental health is typically a condition, an illness, or a diagnosis. So first and foremost, if I'm sitting in this conversation right now, I'm going, okay, I need to make sure that my staff, that the kids that I'm serving, the caregivers that I'm serving, that the participants in my program, whatever that may look like, that we are all somewhat educated in a way where we're not misusing mental health in a way that is more stigmatizing. That's first and foremost. I think second, I would look at the isolation statistic. We have a fall health conference that's coming up where all of our sessions are panel conversations, communal conversations about lessons that we've learned, environmental related emergency preparedness, right? Like we're looking at specific areas in all of our upcoming sessions for that fall health conference. And everything is in community, by community, for community, because the World Health Organization this past July highlighted that isolation. Why does that matter to us as youth development professionals? Jake, the reason I believe that you and I, in our collaboration, and why the organizations like ours are trying to find ways to share is to allow different areas of expertise to bring content forward in a relevant manner. And I believe that, like, when I sit around a table, I don't know, I'd love to know in the chat from each of you, do you have a hard time or an easy time explaining what you do for work? Because this is an isolating industry. And what we felt this summer more than any summer before, our health hotline calls were coming from camp leaders that were saying, I feel alone. I feel disconnected. I feel like I'm in need of community. And that is different than if we go back and look at these mental health statistics, Jake, that you've put into the chat. In the summer of 22, our most frequent health hotline call was about behavioral issues with campers. You all remember, if you've been in the industry, you remember being in that spot where you're like, I don't know how we're going to regulate these kids. And a big part of that is very true. And then the summer of 23, the most common call we had was about staff. Our staff are not all right. There's something going on with them. We need to figure out how we're going to train them differently. And then the summer of 24, it was caregivers are not all right. And Vivek Murthy highlighted that with parents are under pressure. Like that is the thing. But this past summer, The folks who were not all right were the people on your left and on your right. The people that you all are sitting here in this time today going, how do we connect in community? And how do we not feel like this industry is hard to articulate to people? Part of the work that we've got to be able to do is understand how we can move forward in such a way where we are focused on well-being as a more holistic understanding to shift from some of the mental health related challenges that are connected to specific diagnoses, conditions, or illnesses for folks. So that's just some of it, Jake, I think, in terms of where we're at. And I would love it if people could just say, yeah, I have a hard time, or no, it's easy for me to articulate. And if it's easy for you, please be honest. But I know that when I'm talking to like somebody at a coffee shop or, at a family function, they're like, wait, what do you do? Like, huh? Like it doesn't seem like a mainstream industry. And then I just tell them I'm investing in young people because I believe that they're the path to a brighter future in our world, right? Like that's how I try to articulate it, but they're like, well, what does that mean, right? I think it's isolating in some capacity to be sitting where we are. And I think we have to name that. We have to take care of ourselves to create the community if we're going to be in a spot where we're doing that for others.
Thanks,
Thanks
John.
for that, John. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree. And thanks for bringing it back to where we're at, and what does this mean for us? You know, I was showing those statistics from like the Center for Disease Control and, from UCLA. We also have stats from our Christian camps from this summer. And we asked this question on our first day camper survey. How often do you feel nervous or anxious, or so nervous that it or anxious that it feels overwhelming? And almost half of the campers that responded, over 2,000 campers this summer, 3,000 campers, um, said they sometimes, often, or always get so nervous or anxious that it feels overwhelming. It was 47% this summer. And so these are the campers that are coming to our camps. And so, what does it mean to create an environment, a space of well-being at our camps? And how can we go about that? And I think John and our friends from ACH have some good answers to that. So I would love to hear those thoughts, John.
Yeah. Um, I think this is a point where maybe I'd like to jump into sharing some slides, if that's all right, Jake. Is that okay?
Yep.
I think
Spot
that I
on.
think that might be
Absolutely.
relevant for where we're at this point in
Yeah,
time.
please.
Because I think that what we're trying to step into here is how do we look at specifically I see some folks that are here that have been through and or a part of Campwell. And I think what we're stepping into with you all is trying to say, okay, how does Campwell play out for Christian camps? Because Campwell already looks very much so holistically at well-being. It's a journey we've been on with from an ACH standpoint to the American Camp Association. We've been collaborators supported by the H.E. Butt Foundation out of Texas, and that this work started really 5 years ago at a point where we were like coming through this thing called COVID, and we were in the midst of what might have been a mental health crisis globally, not just for youth, but globally. And that mental health crisis was something where we had to zoom out and go, okay, well, what is this distinction between mental health and or well-being? And how do we specifically look upstream? And what I mean upstream is like from a positive psychological standpoint, how do we frame content that really is more preventative? When we look at the dimensions of care within the Alliance for Camp Health, we typically look at our education. We say, is this prevention? Is this intervention? Or is this health promotion? Those are the three dimensions of care that healthcare providers are looking at. We believe at ACH, every single camp needs subject matter experts or communities of practice that reflect healthcare providers, behavioral health specialists, and youth administrators, camp directors, right? And a part of this collaboration with you all and what we're stepping into that I love, Jake, is that you just referenced research that you have. We have the same thing from a screening tool that we used called digital empathy in a project to highlight how kids were feeling and trying to help them get a bit of empathy stepping into their work and a dose of that empathy so that they could feel seen, heard, and connected. And what we know to be true is kids can be anxious and or worried about certain things coming into camp and be really feeling like they belong at the same time. those things can be true. And so, how do we look more holistically at what camps historically have done well? And that's where this work started out, right? With this ACA research and the National Camp Impact Study. I don't know if you want to speak to this a little bit, Jake, in terms of how Sacred Playgrounds has looked at this work, but we see this short and long term outcome was where we started, with ACA in this, looking at their national study and going, what are we trying to do to create a quality camper experience? And how do those dimensions of care, right? Is this prevention, intervention, or health promotion? And we believe Campwell is much more so directly looking at the prevention, whereas like youth mental health first aid gets at the intervention. This is prevention work, and it's health promotion work, framing for your whole entire community and the culture that you're creating.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I agree completely. I don't have much to add except to commend this study to folks and say what we do at camp matters and it works and we can see we have demonstrated through research that it lasts. And so, as John is saying, we're trying to be proactive here, not reactive. And so, giving these kids these quality experiences helps develop resiliency and all these things that are going to really help them navigate through life's challenges. And so that's one of the great strengths that camp has. And you can see just some of the highlights here. Thanks, Jared, for sharing that. The research slide or the ACA's site.
Yeah, that's a great spot.
Yeah.
That's a great landing page for the ACA research, including this National Camp Impact Study and the other things they've got going on.
Yep. So I think something else that's happening here is there is this direct correlation to, are we within our camps doing a good job, Jake, right? Like from this study saying, how are we capturing engagement and belonging and directly connecting engagement with friendships, right? Belonging with this independence. Like these character, I know AC is doing a lot of character work in this specific, but all character work leads to improved well-being, right? Dr. Martin Seligman, who was really the founder of positive psychology and has had students at the University of Pennsylvania School of Psychology that have been directly connected, like Angela Duckworth, right? The character lab, all of that character work came out of well-being work. And so we need to figure out, how are we articulating the ingredients that we're distilling down that make camp special? How are we identifying what those things are and then directly correlating them to the structure of what makes it work the way in which it does? What makes camp such a beneficial space? We have to articulate those things and define them for everybody.
And that's where we talk about the five fundamentals of Christian camps. And so just like the National Impact Study said, quality experiences. You have to start with a quality camp experience if you want these great outcomes. And we found the same thing through our research with Christian camps, is that we need to have these fundamental ingredients in place. Otherwise, we can't expect these great outcomes in terms of faith formation and character formation and all these other things that we're looking for in terms of camp outcomes. It always starts with the quality experience. And you'll see in our five fundamentals framework, and this was well before Campbell started, right? Way back in 2015 when we started this work, safe space has always been one of those key fundamental characteristics of camp.
Mm. Yeah, it's fantastic work. And I think that's where we want to continue to point to and build the research, because we need to have frameworks. And I would say uh, this is an opportunity where I'm curious, if maybe people just could, use the thumbs up or some type of reaction if you are familiar with SEL, with social and emotional learning. I'm just wondering if folks are familiar with that. I'm seeing some thumbs, yeah, some reactions. So what we've looked at within in the relationships that we have an advisory board at ACH that has individuals that are part of the American Academy of Pediatrics, or folks that are connected with the American Psychological Association, and they're trying to blend their world with the camp industry and what it is. And SEL is something that, from an educational standpoint, is looking at learning outcomes. This Mesh Plus framework we've developed very much so is looking at the continued prevalence of spiritual awareness psychotherapy. Dr. Lisa Miller and her amazing work. She was a student of Seligman's and from a well-being standpoint, and has done work with the Templeton Foundation, National Institute of Mental Health. And there's also nature therapy that exists, and all of the benefits of nature that have been looked at historically. Shinrin Yoku, looking at Eastern cultures, or when you go to Finland or Denmark, or uh, you know, I'm Swedish. You go to Sweden, like there's other countries that have done a significant amount of work around when we look at the benefits, the health benefits directly correlated for the mind, but because of nature and spirituality, we're looking at camp and going, this is the essence of where we're at. It's Richard Louv's work. Camp is not just a recreational space for fun, it's also a spot for health outcomes that we're seeking. And so ACH has brought forth a framework that we've been bringing out as a part of this work over the last 5 years to say, yes, mental, emotional, social health matter, but there's also, Vivek Murthy named that spirituality was one of the four key pillars in his closing address as the Surgeon General, and said, hey, we need to lean in and focus on this. So Campwell, from the very beginning, has looked at an umbrella, this Mesh Plus framework that says, if we're going to get to a space or a place where a positive childhood experience that offsets the adverse ones and all of the health ramifications that come as a result of an adverse childhood experience, we need a framework that serves as an umbrella that gives structure to the industry. And so this is what we continue to move forward with with a desire to see educational resources, materials, and programs like Campwell to be lifted as a result of this. And so I want to highlight as well, just as we're sitting within this space and place, I see my friend Jill Goldstein Smith, who's from the Foundation of Jewish Camps, that's here, and she and her team have done amazing work around well-being from a whole entire well-being conference where this type of a framework is being brought forth, looking at some of Dr. Elisa Miller's work around spirituality that's incorporated into Campwell. And so I just want to give a shout out, Jill. Thanks for being with us. Uh, a big part of what we're looking at, I just want to identify that like ACH, part of the beauty of collaborating with Sacred Playgrounds to figure out how do we bring Campwell to Christian camps in more of a specific way is to recognize that this work started by and through a community of thought and development, right? This is not something that ACH just said, hey, we're going to get into a vacuum and do this on our own. ACA and ACH brought forth subject matter experts, clinicians who were also camp professionals, so behavioral health specialists doing this work to figure out how do we create a program and or content that's going to be beneficial and relevant, and how do we do that in a unique way that it's pointing to research, pointing to existing evidence, and simultaneously building evidence. So this has been a community of thought leaders that have brought together resources that are made by camp people for camp people. This is the first of its kind where it's not like youth mental health first aid was created in another setting. This was created in terms of every single aspect of it has interaction and or a camp lens that's a part of it. Some of the bigger pieces, and Jake, I'm just going to kind of go into presenting a little bit on some more pieces here, because I think that when we look at well-being, part of what we're trying to get at is how do we interpret it? And historically, like even when we're having a discussion around mental health, we're not identifying, are we talking about ADHD as a diagnosis or functioning neurological disorder as a disorder that's connected to someone's mental health? We're looking at well-being. And oftentimes, if you were just to say, hey, are you well? I mean, I would hear my peers saying, if you're well, it means you're well off. It means you have a certain amount of money, right? Or if you're well, you're doing well because you've achieved something academically. And what Seligman started to look at in the early 2000s was that optimum functioning is not defined by the culture that you're in. It's defined by you, the individual. And so what we have identified is how is well-being for you, each and every single one of you, directly connected with the different parts of your brain that help to balance out chemically. And how do you see beyond maybe some of the systems that have said, this is what well-being is defined by the letters next to your name, the number of dollars next to your salary or what you're there. And so this community of thought and development worked laboriously, argued, sweated, worked on like how do we define well-being, looking at the World Health Organization, looking at the CDC, American Psychological Association, and how do we define that for camp? And so we said the definition that we believe everyone should be looking at within the camp industry is well-being is characterized by each of these elements: physical, mental, social, emotional, environmental, like the natural world, and spiritual health. And this is at the individual and the organizational level. So that when all are well at your camp, when all are well, you, your participants, your staff, right? Whoever, whatever level of the organization, when all are well, they are participating fully and contributing in the ways that they choose. Not just the way that you choose, but the ways that they choose, because they feel safe, supported, and connected. And those words, safe, supported, and connected, as we had defined them, went into a logic model, went into a theory of change that we're going to take a look at here, went into us building evidence and research that said if we focus on these words, these areas, which have become a part of the outcomes, we see this shift in this cycle. So all of Campbell's work and what we see as the foundational elements of well-being, there are other schools of thought, but primarily we've defined this by camp people, for camp people. What does this look like within the camp community? And part of the work that we're doing with Sacred Playgrounds is looking at, for a Christian camp, what does this look like? How do we, when we start to talk about physical well-being, do we look at this from a through a spiritual lens in some capacity, through a faith-based Christian lens? And so we look at it and go, okay, we're asking the question of how well does your body function? You, right? And then we're looking at how do you interpret your thoughts from a mind standpoint? How are you getting on with others? Not just are you a social creature, like how are you doing with others that you are coming in contact with? And why does this matter, right? What does this look like for somebody who has a specific faith that identifies with the passages that support? How do you feel psychologically? Are your emotions building up or tearing down, right? How do you interact with nature? What's it look like to be a caretaker, to be a steward of something? And how do you live with purpose? Are you finding an altruistic connection? That's Dr. Lisa Miller's work. She highlights it so beautifully in direct correlation to well-being, that we actually pass through wilderness moments in our journey because that's a part of spiritual awakening. That's a way in which our brain, which has a spiritual center, her work has identified that each and every single person in their brain has, in their parietal lobe, a spiritual area that flares up when there's some type of spiritual encounter. All of our work is geared toward not necessarily being in a spot where when your staff say, hey, we're looking to figure out how we provide therapy. Camp is a therapeutic space. Each and every single one of us are operating in a space that is therapeutic, but that does not mean that you or your staff or anybody who is not clinically certified, that they have to provide therapy. All of this work around well-being, supporting each of those pieces. And I can go back and look at them and we could say, yeah, Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and his school of well-being, they look at adding in, in addition to physical and mental and emotional, social, environmental, spiritual, they also add in economic, right? Or Miller and Seligman, they look at adding in educational. They see educational well-being as a piece. Now, when we look at well-being, we see it as at camp, how are you providing support and what tools do you need for your own well-being to support, and how do you support somebody else's? So if you're having a behavioral issue or a participation challenge, how do you improve functioning right now for the individual? And how do you set your staff up to be able to do this as well? The goal at camp in the therapeutic space is to look at how we let experts focus on the long-term healing and how we create a space where well-being is the center and we can help to improve functioning right now based upon where someone is at. And we see that these are the outcomes of how we're going to do that. We look at identifying, are we secure with ourselves? Are we sure we know who we are with others? And how does that look in the ecosystem? Are we secure in, right, Jake, the faith that we're sitting in? And the way in which this plays out is we know Maslow's hierarchy of needs is really moving people towards self-actualization. But within the work of Campwell, we've seen that somebody can't be at a spot where they're looking to connect or contribute if they're not feeling like there's been a space that's supporting who they are supporting who they are with other people, and identifying that this is a cycle and that this is a cycle that is fluid for all of us. Like at any given point in time, I might not be 100% of the time ready to give 100% towards contribution. I can't contribute in that same way. And if I'm really secure in who I am, if I feel like that's the way in which it's playing out, if I'm going to grow in my faith, if I'm going to connect in my faith, if I'm going to be contributing in my faith, then these pieces play out in a way where I've got to be able to name where I am at any given point in time. And so all of Campwell is built into there's a specific module that is focused on safety. And then there's a specific module focused on the tools that you have to support and what it looks like to support yourself and others. There's a module that dives into connection with yourself, with others, with the natural world, with the ecosystem around you in these ways. So I'm going to stop there. I think we've given a lot in terms of the elements of well-being, the outcomes, and what this looks like in terms of Campwell for Christian camps. But we wanted you to be able to get some pieces that you could start to think about or chew on today.
Thanks, John. Yeah, you guys, there aren't specifics in the chat so far, so we may be able to dive back into kind of part B there in a second. But um, while I'm while I'm killing a little time here, feel free to chat in. Feel free to chat in a question, everyone, if you've got something that's come up, whether that was kind of to some of those, to some of that foundation, the statistics, the things that Jake and John were sharing earlier, or this last little bit as John kind of shares with us how, as we see that situation, that problem, how well-being is really the solution. And then we're going to talk about how we get there in our own context, in our own camp, here in a minute. So, other questions? I don't see anything going in. So, John, you might just get to high five you right back into those next. I know we've got a few more slides to share there. Everybody, feel free to keep going in terms of any of those questions that you've got. Otherwise, go ahead, John.
Sweet. I appreciate it. I want to make sure that we're identifying in this that the the relationship, what we're trying to do is make sure that you are able to provide yourself with tools as well as your staff with tools through this work. And that part of the relationship between ACH and Sacred Playgrounds is to identify the ways in which this could play out specifically for you all to bring this if you are working at a Christian camp in that way. I'm going to ask maybe just real quick, Jared, if there's Mary, if you could speak to, I know you're on our team, but you also run a Christian camp in
Mhm.
Colorado, and maybe you could just share real quick, like as we're the basic of these outcomes and the elements of well-being, how have they been beneficial to you or your staff in focusing or looking at everything through this lens of well-being in your work?
Sure. My name is Mary, and I'm on the team at the Alliance for Camp Health. I'm also the founder director of a Christian camp in Colorado. And this summer 25 was the third year that we've you implemented Camp Well. And I think most importantly, what it did is give our program staff language to articulate what we were already doing. And I think many of us at Christian camps can, or faith-based camps can easily look at this just makes so much sense to us, but the Campwell framework just gave us language to put into place. And this summer, at the end of the summer, standing in the parking lot, a long-term camp family came up to me and they put into words what we'd been saying. They repeated back to me. They said, "We really appreciate the space for your camp, for our kids to find their place of well-being." And they used the language, the pillars. They said our kids feel safe and they love that they can contribute. And I think it was not only coming from us to camp families, but when camp families repeated that back, it was so significant and it made the work feel just really, really meaningful. And so it's our in the third year of using the work, I can't say enough about how valuable it's been to give language to what we were already doing. So, Jake, Jared, John, thanks for the good work. It's really, really significant. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks,
I
Mary.
think so. I'm going to jump back in to share a little bit of what this process has looked like, Mary, for you and maybe for some others that are here, and then where and how this relationship starts to identify a unique lens where well-being is being incorporated into something specifically for Christian camps. But Mary, I think what I want to highlight first and foremost is you've been in this work for a lot of years, leading the way, but I think doing great work and now starting to distill down, right, specific ingredients around in areas or elements of well-being that have been beneficial to your staff, beneficial to your participants, beneficial to your caregivers who are seeing that difference to identify it. And that meant you had to make some adjustments to what it was that you were training and or to what you were looking at in the work. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though you've done good work and there's a lot more that's on the plate of camp directors like educators today, there's a lot more that you're being asked to do in less time. But that has probably meant that there's certain practices that you had to let go of or shift or change in order to be able to incorporate this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I do think that that's a piece of it. And I think why I want to stop and highlight that is because when we get into the work that we were doing within Campwell with ACA, we saw that through our logic model, there was a theory of change that if we were seeking to make a significant impact, we had to look across every level of the organization. So when you hear about Campwell, you're hearing about levels, not levels of education, but levels of the organization. And we've seen that somebody like Mary, who's an owner executive, when she's participating in Campwell fully, then she has the ability to foster a culture where all can be well. Right. So that may be some of you. You may be in that seat, or you may be someone who's really responsible for staff training. And so when you're a leader, year-round staff member in some capacity, and you've participated in Campwell, then you're identifying how you're going to create an environment where staff can be safe, supported, connected, and contributing. And the beauty of this is then that means that frontline summer staff are in a spot where if they feel safe, supported, and connected, then they're helping to uphold that definition of well-being that we've seen, where we identify that participants then feel like they can engage fully in the ways in which they choose. And the beauty of that is that if we're harnessing, then this impact happens. If we're harnessing the experience of well-being at camp, safe, supported, connected, contributing, reflection is in there, but contributing, I'll update that, Jake. As a foundation, then the goal is for flourishing, right? Seligman's work around well-being is not because we want to just, we're not improving character to improve character scores. We're looking to improve the health outcome directly connected to someone that believes that they're flourishing in the world. That's self, family, school, community. And that happens across various levels of the organization. And so the level 2 trainings that we've been rolling out over the last few years, those level 2 are for the ones that are responsible for staff training. How do you train your staff in and around well-being? What's the content? What's the time? How do you go about doing this? And that's been different than this level 3. Last year, there was a group that ACA had together in a cohort that really were looking at organizational well-being. How do we identify more holistically in our marketing, in our hiring, in our business practices, well-being to be centered on it? This is not new. Like corporations have been doing well-being based work and creating wellness programs for their entire staff, like Fortune 500, 300 companies since 2007. I was in Silicon Valley and there were like wellness programs coming out with some of the top entities because that's what they were saying was needed. And we as an industry need to adopt this. What are our well-being based practices? What's the training that we're providing? And how do we get to a spot where this level 1 training is something that you all would be bringing to your staff? Part of what we do within Campwell is we have these 4 modules, and in each one there's a lot of theories and concepts that are presented, but there's also activities that are meant for you to do some work to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And each one of these parenthetical numbers is a citation, and that citation brings you to a resource that you would get that has links to all of the publications, the articles, the research around the concepts and theories that we're presenting. And that helps you too. When you leave, you get a Mesh Plus resource guide from ACH You get the Campbell Level 2 curriculum, which is like a narrative that identifies it. You get the roadmap that directly connects you to all of these sources that that offer the direct connection to the concepts and theories. And what we're working on with Sacred Playgrounds is that you would have a curriculum that helps you to narrate this, to find citations that are connected to elements of a certain faith expression that would come out of that. But you would leave with all four of these resources and the slides that kind of coincide with it. You get those as a PDF, and then you get unifying language with others in the industry. We've seen at this point in time over 150 organizations and 300 plus people do this, and we're thankful that Sacred Playgrounds is joining in on the partnership, because we'd like to have this lifted at Christian camps as well, across the country, and be able to incorporate this so that really, if we train more staff, the reach could be to a much broader number of kids. We'd like to see in the next year and a half, 500,000 kids be benefiting from this work, so that we see well-being improving for them as we kind of continue to progress. So the next opportunity, as we work with Sacred Playgrounds, is to join us at the OMC Great Gathering. Jake and I will be there rolling out this content, right, Jake?
Absolutely, John. I'm really excited about this, and it's some of you have taken Campwell already, and so you're like, "Ooh, do I need to do it again?" The answer is no. It's the same content. It's repackaged. It's repackaged for a specifically Christian camp audience, so we can have conversations in a slightly different way. We can structure the training in a slightly different way, but it's the same. It's the same content in that sense, with a few updates specifically for Christian camps. And so we're really excited about the OMC Great Gathering, and about this is a pre-gathering event, and there will be more of these trainings. And so we're really hoping to be able to offer a training here in the Midwest, where we're located at Sacred Playgrounds, and then one in the South as well, in the coming months, and so before the summer. So we're hoping to do two more of these. Campbell training specifically with Sacred Playgrounds, and designed for the Christian camp cohort. But there are lots of other Campbell trainings as well. I think Nikki or John can drop that in the chat too, where you can see where there's other opportunities to sign up for this. You can see what we're trying to do is promote well-being. So we're hopeful that you can see the framework, and already start to apply some of these things at your camp. How are you focusing on mesh plus well-being at your camp? How are you ensuring that your staff, your year-round staff, your summer staff, your guests, your campers are feeling safe, supported, connected, and contributing? And how is that leading towards well-being from a Mesh Plus standpoint? So that's really what we're hoping that you start to envision. And the Campwell training is one of the avenues to get there. And it's, as John said, it's vetted in the industry, and we've got multiple people on this call who have already gone through the training, and have begun applying those things at their camp. And as Mary said, it's been very impactful. And so these are some of the ways to do that. We'd love to hear what questions you have, either about Campwell itself, but also about like what can we do now? Where can we start with this Mesh Plus training? And I would say, why don't I kick off the questions that way, John? So
Yeah.
as we get more questions in the chat, please put them in there. But why don't I say, what's my first step? I might be ready to sign up for these trainings, great, but maybe I can't make it. What's my first step in this down this road?
I think whether you're to go to a training or not, I think the first step is to take a look within and understand, what am I doing to balance my own well-being?
Mm.
Am, am I in a spot where I'm looking at these elements and I know what it is that I need to invest in to take care of my well-being? And do I consider inviting my staff into some type of practice? Well-being is a skill. Dr. Richard Davidson identifies this so well. He has a TED Talk in it that he's focused on. I would maybe go listen to that. We all practice certain things every single day, and there's certain skills that we seek to develop. And I would say, when I get to go and do a staff training, my favorite thing, the thing that I offer, is a WWW, what went well today. It's a practice that I have with my partner. Like, we work on it. Like, is there some practice that you are looking at where you are taking care of some element of your well-being? Because if you do that, you will start to see things shift. I think Mary, or you know, I'm looking at Katie. I know you've participated. I'm looking at individuals that have been a part of Campwell, and I think when you take care of yourself, there is something to that moment. I get to fly on planes too often. There is something about that whole moment of like putting the oxygen mask on yourself first that is very true.
Thanks for that answer, John. That's really helpful. How are we taking care of our own well-being and our own spiritual, social, emotional, all these things well-being? Um, that's the theory of change that you talked about. It needs to be at all levels of our organization, and it starts with us. It starts with us.
Hmm.
Jared, we have any other
I
questions in the
see.
chat?
We do.
Great. Let
Yeah.
us have it.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. So Nancy, I'm gonna basically read your question because I think the context that you put there was important. So Nancy's saying, I'm a medical professional and a board member for Lutheran Camp. And although not directly involved in camp, programming and summer staff training is committed to supporting this. What recommendations would you have for how to proceed? So we know we've got some folks here who are in, full-time executive or program leadership roles. We can look around and know that we've got some folks who are supporting in different ways. So, want to support this. And so, how might we connect with what language might we use? What might be ways that we would connect with those folks to support this and take some steps?
This, yeah, this is where I'd probably zoom out to a bit more of a macro lens. And I think the invitation for each and every single person here is, uh, although we have done an amazing job of creating environments where kids can belong, where grit can be developed, where resilience is exercised, hope is discovered and found, like camp is all of these pieces. And yet there's more that we need to be able to do to articulate how we're capturing it and to participate in this. Campwell, we ask that you have two individuals from your organization that come into a training for how you're going to look to transform your summer staff training. And a lot of this is based upon we had research a few years ago at ACH that identified that camps were giving a half an hour or less to their mesh training for their staff. And you exercise tools every single day, much more so. Tracy Gaslin, our CEO, was so struck by this. She was like, you will use mesh plus related tools in your tool bag every single day at camp. And you might not use the 3 hours of training that you take for CPR. Now you have to have the CPR training, but states require a minimum of 3 hours that go into CPR first aid. And you're doing that. And so I think, Nancy, I would say I would invite your interest holders, your decision makers. The biggest, most significant challenge for folks to get a buy-in, and maybe I'd lean on Katie in some capacity, from Cross Trails here. Like, I think that there's a way in which you have to invite your leaders to consider how they prioritize this work. We have seen retention rates increase and enrollment rates increase for all Campwell participating camps. Your staff retention, for those that have been in this work, Mary can speak to it. We have others that have been a part of it. That when you invest in the well-being for your whole organization, when you train your staff and you frame and help them to understand what they're doing to take care of their well-being and then how that sets them up to take care of others, it has been transformational in terms of retention rates and enrollment rates. It's a business return on investment. So Nancy, like the invitation is, can you articulate that in such a way that a decision maker says, okay, we'll double down on well-being. We'll double down on well-being.
Thanks, John. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, those, as we've talked before. Feel free to keep putting questions, and we're gonna wrap up here shortly, everyone. Um, but if you've got some last questions here, put them in there. I found it helpful as we talked through this, John, and even as we talked through this, just our plans for this day, how tied, and I keep getting struck by how tied this work is, how tied a well-being is to the camper outcomes that we are covering our mission statements and our board members are asking about. And And that is a key difference for me. Like this isn't just, yes, it's good, and it directly impacts the things that we are called to do, those that we're called to impact. One, two, the layered audience has also been a thing that has been so helpful and striking even for me in this because we go right we take our campers and we've talked on Sacred Playgrounds podcast and things about how about staff, staff well-being and mental health and things like that. And it, again, it's striking for me. Wait, no, we're talking campers, we're talking their families, we're talking yes, our staff, and to your point earlier, ourselves even, checking in on ourselves. It's so interesting how many calls you were getting from folks who were in these levels of leadership. So
Yeah, I think I
really
think I
helpful.
think a closing piece to that, right? Like we have seen, I mean, we even have it on bracelets where it helps to remind kids, like summer staff, like if you're safe, if you're supported, like you will see your well-being, right? This is just a sweet memory mechanism to help it stick. But we are in a spot where we can't continue to expect behavioral change, Jared, if we're not willing to change the systems in which we're creating. We have
Truth.
created systems historically that have some beneficial value for sure. We're not saying you have to change what you're doing from a camp standpoint. It's identifying that how do you incorporate well-being as the primary lens in which you're looking at holistically, spiritually, for your faith into what it looks like for camps to be well. I wish 2 decades ago when I was starting out for a decade run as an executive director, I wish I had this lens at that point in time to running camp. It would have changed. It would have changed my practice.
Mm.
Instead of just right thinking, it would have changed to right doing. It's that orthodoxy versus orthopraxy.
So valuable. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody. This is a reminder of how important it is to lean into that program quality. That was one of the first slides that John showed. That when our programs, when our people are well, when we're having good experiences, then the outcomes change. That is our mission in ministry. We're trying to impact these young people. We're trying to impact their families, their systems. We need places where they can be well, where wellness is promoted, and then where they can be sent back home. And so, as we improve these things at camp, the camper experience is better, the outcomes that we're aiming for increase, and that means people come back. And so that's naturally going to impact our camper enrollment and our staff retention. And those are the things that we also care about. We're not here just to fill all the bunks, but we know that when people have good experiences and when our mission and ministry is powerful and impactful, people come back and they tell others about us. And so that's a positive feedback loop that we're looking for. So thanks so much for these strategies. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody, for your questions. The recording will be available for you and the slides will be available. Yes, Jared?
Both.
What
Yep.
else can we expect, Jared?
Yeah, here's what you can expect. Like Jake said, we'll send those out to the list of people who signed up. That's one thing that will happen post this experience. So if for some reason you don't get those, and the email bounced or something, feel free to reach out and let us know. We'll make sure that you get those, both of those. So that you can expect to, again, like Jake said, we would love to see you back up in the chat there. If you are coming to the Great Gathering, a whole big bunch of us will be there, and we would love to see you. That is the next best time, just as another reminder and call to action there. That's the next best time to do this. So, to take an extra day and some change basically in the front end there to join us. If you are curious, we can play connector, right? So just hello@sacredplaygrounds.com, our general email, and we can connect it to any of these folks. All right. If you want to hear more of Mary's story about how things have played out as an example at her camp, we'll connect you with Mary. And if you have questions for John or Nikki or anybody else on their team, they would be happy to connect as well. So those are the things from here. That's what you can expect. We'll have another couple webinars coming up. One in the winter, one in the spring, from Sacred Playground. So heads up, stay tuned. We'll make sure those get out. There were some links up there about I put a couple in about podcasts that were connected to what we're talking about today. So feel free to give those a listen. One of them just dropped today. Around some fresh summer 2025 findings on camper confidence. And there was clearly a tie, more than I even thought there would be, Jake, to some of the things that we talked about already today. So you can give that a listen if you want to keep going. Great, Jen. See you then. Thanks again, everybody. Grateful to have you join us. We'll send you those things out, and thanks for joining. Grateful. Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see ya.
Great to see you all. Blessings to you all in your ministries.